We're live. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the second BHA and Filson Skills Night and the first of our Women in the Woods series. My name is Trey Curtis, and I'm BHA's Recruitment, Retention, and Reactivation Coordinator. We've got three great speakers tonight, including Madeline Damon, Liz Lynch, and Tori Veyer. I'll let them introduce themselves soon, but tonight we're going to be talking about why women hunt, specifically as the fastest growing demographic in hunting. This group of women will explore personal identities and motivations for hunting, along with answering questions to get you started. Before we move on, I'd like to take a moment to thank Filson for being a partner and for partnering with BHA on these skills nights specifically. On that note, and in celebration of Public Lands Month, BHA and Filson have teamed up to support public land with a limited edition product, including a hat, beanie, vest, and a shirt, which have BHA graphics and logos. All are available at filson.com, and I believe at the bottom of your screen, you can also click that link. We'll have a drawing for a door prize. One participant will win a large dry duffel bag and a beanie, value of $274. So stick around throughout the entire event. We might draw your name. We will announce the winner at the Q&A session. That being said, if you have questions for the presenters, please type them in the Ask Question box down below, and then at the end, we'll filter those to the presenters. With all that being said, I'd like to give one more shout out to Filson for all they do with BHA to help protect our wild public lands, waters, and wildlife. And with that, I'll turn it over to the presenters.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Liz Lynch. I, among many other things, now live in Wyoming, but I grew up in New Jersey. And although my kind of journey to hunting as a sum total is a bit unique to me, what I've found, the longer I hunt and the more women especially that I connect with, I realize my story is pretty common. I'm an adult onset hunter, which is a term that I've heard thrown around, kind of describing basically people like me who didn't grow up hunting. I've always been a bit of a nature nerd, but I do not come from an outdoorsy family. So I was very lucky that my parents nonetheless kind of saw my outdoor interest and supported me. But it was a long, strange trip that involved working in a morgue, working on a chicken farm, moving out to the rural West from the urban East. That kind of changed my perspective on food and all that good stuff. So food's, of course, for me, always been a primary motivator for hunting. Prior to hunting, I really wasn't a meat eater. I actually I had stopped eating meat when I was about 12 years old because I didn't like the idea of how the animals were treated. And basically over time, when I was in college, one of my majors was environmental studies, specifically with a focus on human-environment interactions. And some of what I learned is that it's really not quite as simple as vegetables good, animals bad when it comes to food sources. But over time, it wasn't until probably 5-6 years after I finished college that I had moved to Missoula, which is how I found BHA, instantly realized, oh, these are totally my people, and started to get a bit more of a nuanced view over the course of, English setter is saying hi, over the course of a few years in between grad school and undergrad, just bouncing around, getting to talk to people who did hunt, who grew up hunting, and realized that there's a lot more nuance to it and a bit more of a soft side about how people feel about the animals that they hunted. So it seemed like maybe it could be something for me, and I really lucked out. I had a mentor who not only grew up in Montana and grew up hunting, but he also worked most of the year as a professional chef. And so for me, part of that initial roadblock of hunting and learning to hunt was figuring out how to cook meat. So I was very fortunate to have him as a mentor, no doubt. And over time, besides food, I would say another grounding reason for me to start hunting and to keep hunting has been just wanting to feel more connected to the place that I live. Like I said, always been a nature nerd, and it was kind of just a source of an uprooted feeling to move from the East, where I felt really comfortable, knew all the trees, knew which plants were food and medicine, knew all the birds, to the Rocky Mountains. It was totally new, and I didn't really have a strong sense of connection to a place that I knew that I wanted to stay. Dog has something to say about that, apparently. But yeah, long story short, I also saw hunting as a way to potentially connect a little bit more to the land around me. And when I started, I had no idea just how much I would learn by being a hunter that I definitely would not have learned if I had remained a vegetarian. Now that I've kind of rounded the corner on hunting for about 5-6 years now, it goes to a whole nother level where I've started to try to engage a bit more with the academia side of things and learning about the science that goes into game management. It's just helped me appreciate things like mule deer and bighorn sheep in a way that I never would have possibly gotten any real appreciation for if I hadn't started hunting. So let's see. I guess the major roadblocks for me up front, and probably still, this is gender regardless, but the cost of hunting can be pretty high. When I started hunting, I was in grad school and living off of a TA stipend. So, like dropping $300 on a used shotgun was actually a lot of money for me. And I would say if you're thinking about hunting or you're new to hunting and you're feeling discouraged by the cost of it, just know that really, as long as you have a good weapon, a good pack, and a good pair of boots, everything is a bit secondary. It looks like we're maybe having some connection issues here. Tori or Madeline, are you guys still able to see me? Okay. Thanks, guys. Anyhow, yeah, going back to gear, don't feel like you need to get all of the premium everything right off the bat. And that's coming from someone who wears head to toe First Light and really nice boots now. But, those first couple of years, like, there's a reason that I still don't have, for example, an ultra high powered rifle scope, because it helps me stay honest about what my hunting capabilities are. I'm not trying to push myself to a limit that I'm not comfortable with. And overall, besides hunting legally and hunting ethically, there's really no wrong way to hunt. And so another kind of initial roadblock that I still feel a little bit now is just seeing other people doing like epic doll sheep hunts in Alaska or tar hunts in New Zealand. And the reality for me is I'm just filling my freezer mostly in front country, and that's a totally valid way to hunt too, because it's, legal and fair chase. So don't feel like you need to be Joey Badass right off the bat. It takes a lot of years and a lot of failure. But that's, for me, the number one joy of hunting, really, is I'm constantly learning. Eventually I'll learn how to bow hunt. Eventually I'll get my own bird dog. It's just been kind of a joyride the whole time to be a perennial student of the woods in a way I wasn't before. So before I pass it off to Madeline, I guess the one thing that I want to note too is I'm talking about my personal experiences here, and I think Tori will probably be able to cover this a bit more in depth when it comes to her research. But basically, these are my experiences, and as you'll note, we kind of all look the same on the panel. There are going to be different motivations and different barriers for, Black women who would like to hunt, Native American women who'd like to hunt, trans, queer, gender non-conforming hunters. But the nice thing about living in an internet age right now is hunting does not seem like so much of a social monolith anymore. And there are a lot of hunters who feel no qualm saying, I'm a hunter and a feminist. I'm a hunter and an anti-racist. So if you're feeling discouraged looking around the hunting community and wondering, am I safe here? Am I welcome here? Are there allies? Just know that even in the 5 years that I've been hunting, I've seen it change a lot. And folks like myself and these two other gals and a lot of people in BHA are allies, and we're happy to help you out. So if you want help finding folks who can be mentors or help building a community that you feel welcome in, reach out and we'll help get you set up. So with that, I will pass off the mic to Madeline.
Sweet. So my name is Madeline, and I'm currently going to school at the University of Montana. And that's kind of also how I was introduced to BHAs, through that club. I grew up in Wisconsin, and so I grew up in a hunting and fishing family. So a little bit different experience. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how that has transferred over to just my hunting here in Montana. And so I mentioned that I grew up in a family that completely supported hunting and fishing. And so that transferred into me starting archery at a really early age, probably around 8 or 9. And since then, I've been absolutely in love with bow hunting. And I just remember these distinct moments where we would go to Barnes and Noble as a family, and I would pick out all these books on white-tailed deer and bow hunting. And then my parents would buy them for me, and I'd finish them in 2 days and want more. So I just had this amazing support crew back in Wisconsin, and they just lifted me up and made me feel like I could do whatever I wanted when it came to hunting and fishing. And I also grew up on hunting private land, which was pretty different than, public land hunting out here. So that was a huge adjustment for me. And I basically had to learn all about public land once I came out here to Montana. And I came out here 3 years ago for school because I wanted to study wildlife biology at And as many of you know, Montana is an amazing place for recreation, and I fell in love with it. And then there was this thing called public land that I didn't quite understand. And in fact, I grew up being told that you just didn't hunt public land in Wisconsin because it was too crowded. There wasn't much of it. So you hunted private, and that's just what people did. And so that's kind of where BHA entered my life freshman year. And they taught me all about public land and what it was. And I just remember being amazed at the thought of public land and just like standing on a hillside and seeing, oh, I can go over there and I'm not trespassing. That's so cool. So that was so fun to learn about. And I also learned that people hunt on the ground here. I didn't realize that people didn't hunt out of tree stands everywhere. So that was kind of a fun adjustment for me once I came out to Montana. But again, there are so many cool people in the club who helped me get started, and they're willing to take the time to talk to me about all these things that I knew absolutely nothing about. And that was great because I was just used to this family support network, and they just went out with me everywhere I went, and I never had to worry about that support. And so the club brought me mentorship, and they took me out, they gave me advice, and they were great. And I loved the club so much, I became president this year. So now I'm trying to give back and offer a ton of mentorship opportunities to other new hunters, because that experience meant a ton to me as a bewildered freshman who didn't know how to hunt outside of a tree stand and didn't know what public land was. So I mentioned that I grew up in my hunting and fishing family. And so my earlier motivations for hunting was really just that tradition and connection to my family and my home. The private land that we've been hunting on has been in my family for years and years. And so there's a lot of history there. And hunting on our private land was like a connection to that history and those stories. I just remember early mornings with my grandpa and my dad sitting up in the tree stands, and that meant a lot to me. And then when I came out here in Montana, I wasn't with my family. There were no tree stands. And so my motivations kind of shifted a little bit. And something that I noticed that really stuck with me was that desire for shared experiences with people. I still don't like hunting alone. It just feels really weird to not go out with a group of people because it's always been like a family activity for us. And so that shared experiences is something that totally transfers over for me. I want to share that with people, and that's something that means more to me than just going out on a solo hunt. Something I also learned a lot about out here was the value of food in hunting and sustainable meat. And I kind of realized that, wow, I love to cook. I love to share my food with people, and I love having people over. And so I started caring more about the meat side of hunting rather than in Wisconsin, my whole family went out together, and it didn't really matter if we got deer or not because there were 5 of us out there in the woods hunting at the same time. And so I feel like I wasn't as food motivated back in Wisconsin like I am now. And that's just kind of changed the way that I think about my hunts and how I approach them, and even just applying for tags. It's changed how I approach that. As far as some different obstacles I've experienced, I mentioned that I had a really hard time with the whole tree stand thing, and I'm definitely still learning about that. I feel like every single hunt that I go on, I'm learning something new and learning from more mistakes when it comes to hunting on the ground. But it's made it really fun. I love learning, and it's such a huge learning experience. And I also had to learn about public land, and Onyx was like amazing. I remember I installed Onyx my freshman year, and I was like, whoa, there's so much public land. And they've been totally instrumental in figuring out where I can hunt and where it's legal to hunt. And I know that this was already touched on, but those out-of-state license prices, money-wise, were just crazy to me as a student. I think it was like $525 was like the student discount in Montana. But yeah, it was just amazing to me because I was used to like $16 licenses back in Wisconsin. And so I actually got a scholarship for my sportsman's license through the BHA club my sophomore year. And that had gotten me started on going out with my bow my sophomore year. And so that was really cool. Awesome to have that support. And since then, I've become a resident of Montana, actually. And so now I can go out for regular license prices. But that's something that I hear a ton around school is those out-of-state license prices. And that's, I think, always going to be an obstacle for us. And I also had to learn how to get started without that family support network. Because we used to go out together, organize our hunts together, and now I felt like I was just sitting there alone, didn't know what to do. And I wanted to find people who could help me plan. I wanted people to go out with me. And so that connection to other hunters was something that I was missing for a while. As far as things that I feel like constrain new hunters in general, I feel like I had a huge advantage when it came to my family. I grew up immersed in hunting and fishing culture, and my family never doubted my capabilities as a hunter. It was just something that we all did together. And I could walk into a room of hunters and just feel like they were my people. Like, this is where I belong. This is my home. Even if I knew nothing about the Western style of hunting, I feel like I really connected to the hunters out here. And I think that's something that not everyone has and not everyone gets to experience. And as a leader of the club now, and as a member of the club in the past, I've realized that that's the kind of environment that is really important to me that we create, is something that people can walk into and feel at home. And they don't feel like they're judged on their experience levels. And I just want people to be able to come into my club or just come to me in general and feel like I'm going to support them in any way possible. Another thing that I wanted to mention is the idea of finding mentors. I had the luck of having some amazing people who helped me learn how to hunt here in Montana and learn how to hunt public land. And I feel like not everyone has that. Based on some women that I've talked to, it's hard to find people that you trust to go out in the woods with, and it's intimidating. One thing that I've noticed, and I share it because I feel like I'm not the only one who's felt this way, but when I was coming here, I had only male mentors growing up, my dad and my grandpa, and I didn't really think anything of it because they were my family and they'd always supported me. And then when I came out here, I was feeling this anxiety and just discomfort approaching men my age about being mentors because I wanted to be taken seriously. And something that I felt is that sometimes when women come into a hunting and fishing atmosphere, they're seen as more of a dating option. And I was feeling that intimidation, like if I approach this guy and ask him to go out on a hunt with me, is that being suggestive? Is that being forward? Like, is he going to think that I want to go out with him? And that's an energy that I've felt before. And it's kind of unfortunate. I don't know if you guys have experienced that as well, but I feel like I just want people to be more open to taking women out and realizing that that's a real fear, at least of mine. And it's something that I still work through. And I just, want to bring attention to it because it's something that was super influential on who I picked to be my mentor. I just didn't want to go out with certain people because it made me nervous. And so that's something that I want people to think about. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it on to Tori to talk about her research.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm hopeful that my section will maybe give a little bit of a larger context to what both of you just talked about. It all ties together really nicely. So yeah, I'm Tori. I just finished my master's at NC State, where I studied college students' relationships with hunting and their hunting related behavior and beliefs. And the project itself is super interesting, but I think the most interesting part is that I myself don't identify as a hunter angler, and neither does my advisor. So I think I was able to approach this master's project with a really unique perspective that somebody like these ladies or somebody who grew up hunting couldn't necessarily bring to this project. So I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., hiking, biking, boating, doing other forms of outdoor recreation, but it wasn't until probably halfway through undergrad that when I started taking wildlife management classes, that's when I started understanding the importance of hunting and supporting hunting a little bit more. But I think y'all are here for a reason. So you understand that hunting is important, or you want to be involved in some way. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse on that note, but I would like to kind of reiterate something both of these ladies already said, is that I'm really grateful to be a part of the BHA community. BHA is one of the first conservation wildlife-based organizations that I've been a part of that I feel really comfortable and welcomed and included as a non-hunter. And that was really important to me because we know that the conservation funding system in the United States right now relies on hunters and anglers. And I wasn't necessarily ready to become a hunter myself, but I really wanted to be a part of the system, and BHA has welcomed me with open arms. I am automatically a part of the family, even though I still consider myself a non-hunter. So a little thanks for them including me and being a part of things like this, where I get to share my perspective, even though I'm not a hunter or angler. And so a little bit more background on myself too. I am not ready to pull the trigger yet myself. I've learned a ton about hunting, kind of like Liz. I found my people in the wildlife community. I'm also a nature nerd, but I am not quite ready to pull the trigger myself. But I love being a part of the hunt in other ways, processing meat, tracking meat, being out with hunters and anglers, totally fine by me. It's just pulling the trigger and taking a life that I'm not ready for yet. And that's okay. And my BHA friends have confirmed and validated that that is okay. So I would like to say, however you choose to participate or not participate is okay, pending that you follow the laws and regulations in your state. But if you choose that pulling the trigger is not right for you, don't think you can't be a part of this conversation and this community. It's up to you, and everybody experiences our outdoor world a little bit differently. So however you choose is okay. So moving back to my research for just a minute, the topic was really interesting to me for a couple of reasons. through my undergraduate work in biology, I fell in love with wildlife management and wildlife conservation, but I came to this realization that the research that happens every day on like college campuses can only take us so far if we can't effectively communicate that research to stakeholders and policymakers and the future generations of people caring about conservation. So that originally got me interested in human dimensions, and I started pursuing graduate opportunities looking at how humans value natural resources and how to better communicate science. So with this project, I really got to dive deep into how college students value natural resources and potentially what the future of conservation looks like, because college students are the next generation of all of the professionals we have out in the world right now. So that was really important to me. And then I think I knew I would be known as like the hunting girl in this community forever, because I'm out of my social science classmates, I'm one of the very few that's studying hunting and fishing as a non-hunter. But I think coming to this project as a non-hunter gave me a really unique perspective to connect with students that were also non-hunters. So like both of these ladies already said, it's kind of intimidating getting started. And maybe I'm not exactly what people think a hunter looks like. So they're more likely to connect with me and have honest, open conversations about why they are or aren't hunting and fishing. So I think just being a non-hunter gave me a leg up in some of these conversations that are a little bit tougher to have when you're intimidated and scared about kind of opening up about hunting and fishing to somebody that cares really deeply about hunting and fishing, as most hunters and anglers do. And so the last point I want to make about like why I even took this project to begin with, as I stated a little bit earlier, hunting and fishing is like the backbone of conservation funding in the United States. And coming into grad school, I knew I wanted to contribute in a meaningful way. I wanted boots on the ground. I wanted my hands dirty. I really wanted to be a part of that system, but I also knew I didn't want to pull the trigger myself. So this project seemed like a really good way for me to get involved with the conservation system. And little did I know, like, it would help me get to BHA and all of these things that I'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, I feel very fortunate to have had these experiences that have led me to this point. So I do want to take a second, bear with me, to share some findings from my research, just so we can put some numbers to what Liz and Madeline have already said. And I have a couple slides that just have visuals, so you don't have to remember all of the things. I'm going to try to share screen. Hold on. Bear with me. Okay, let's see. All right, I can't see any of you anymore, so I'm just going to go ahead and hope this is still working. So these are just a couple notable results from my thesis project. So overall, we surveyed almost 20,000 undergraduate students at 23 different universities across the United States. About 16,000 of those answered the gender-related questions. That's why this number is a little bit lower. And matching the national body of students at large, we have a little over half of the students identifying as female. So that matches the national population. But diving into students that would or wouldn't hunt, of the students who said they might or definitely would hunt in the future, 36% identified as female or non-binary. And of the women or non-binary folks who answered, yes, I would definitely hunt, or yes, I might hunt in the future, that's 32%. So on the surface, these numbers may not jump out to you as really high, but if we look at like the current stats and demographics of the hunting population, these numbers are really high. This is a drastic improvement from where we're sitting right now. So 35% of women being interested, women or non-binary folks being interested in hunting, is a huge improvement and really promising for the future if we want the population of hunters to match the population of America at large. And to take a quick moment to go back to what Liz said in the beginning, we're speaking from our personal experiences. We are 3 white women sitting on this panel right now, so I can't speak to the experiences that Black, Indigenous, or people of color have out in the outdoors. We do have data on it. I have not analyzed it yet. I don't have the results for it yet, but there is evidence to say that there's intersectionality and different groups of people interact with the natural environments in different ways. So while my co-panelists and I have a diversity of experiences, we also have some shared experiences being white women in this industry. So I don't want to minimize the intersectionality of outdoor experiences with race, ethnicity, gender expression, hometown, education level, religion, etc. All of that matters, and all of that changes who you are in these environments and how comfortable you feel. And like Liz said, we want everyone to feel welcomed and included. So that is something we're definitely working on at BHA. And moving on to like the meat of the question, why women hunt, why we're all here tonight. Largely the women that answered, I should say women and non-binary folks. For the rest of this, when I say women, I mean people who identify as female or gender non-conforming. The largest motivations for them to either approve of hunting or go hunting themselves was to help control species that are damaging ecosystems or damaging to people, and then also to obtain local free range and ethical meat. So just like we said before, not all women are going to be motivated by the same things, but largely they are not motivated by traditional hunting values like harvesting a trophy. So if you're listening to this panel as a hunter or someone who wants to be a mentor, keep in mind that some of these motivations may shift. We may have to appeal to women in ways that we wouldn't necessarily appeal to the traditional hunting crowd. And like we all talked about before too, just going over some of the major barriers we saw, the big 3 are time competition, cost, and lack of skills. So again, if you're somebody that already hunts, just giving women in your life or women that want to be in the woods the skills to succeed in the woods on their own is a huge help. A short anecdote about the time competition. Through this study, we've talked to a lot of people about why they hunt or why they don't hunt. And interestingly, we've heard a lot of women prioritize other activities or traditional female gender role activities over going out hunting for a weekend. Our male interviewees had a lot easier of a time saying, oh yeah, I can take a weekend off. The wife is watching the kids, or the cooking or grocery shopping will be done when I get back. Whereas the women we talked to had a lot harder of a time passing off childcare to another person. They prioritized that over spending a ton of time on leisure activities in the woods. So that's just an interesting side note. But again, if you're someone that already hunts, keep these things in mind as you try to recruit the women in your life into the woods with you. They're not necessarily constrained by moral objections or people like me not wanting to pull the trigger. They want to be there. They just need mentors to teach them and people to help them take that first step. So in this PowerPoint, I've also linked to a couple resources and articles about being a sportswoman. So that's the academic in me coming out. I guess you all have homework now. I'm just kidding. But these are really good resources. I think the first 2 links are from Gear Junkie, and the last 3 are actually from Filson and their profiles on really powerful sportswomen in our country. So if you're a woman interested in starting hunting, right, and you haven't yet jumped off the ledge, I guess, these are great resources on places to start. They will connect you with other sportswomen in this community. So my biggest piece of advice is ask for help, because there are plenty of us out there that want to help you get into this community. So just find who you mesh with, who you gel with. There are so many people willing to help. And if you're already a female hunter and you want more women in your outdoor spaces, invite them, welcome them, and respect and appreciate them for whatever they are willing to or not willing to do. Whatever they bring to the table is okay. Just validate them and let them know that you want them in that outdoor space. So with that, I think I can stop sharing and pass it back over to Trey, who will start a Q&A session, I think. Yeah.
Oh, unmuted now. Awesome. Thank you, Liz, Madeline, and Tori. Those are all very great perspectives. As Tori said, we're going to move on to questions from the audience. We have some really great questions here. I will pose these generally to the three of you, and if you feel particularly interested in answering it, please feel free to do so. And so, first question we have here from Casey, and she asks, I feel like going out to hunt solo as a woman, and especially for big game, can be really tough for several reasons. Do you hunt solo, or do you typically take a male and or a female partner with you?
I can start if that's all right. Either or. Yeah, this is something that I talk about fairly openly. I am extremely uncomfortable hunting solo, and that's still something that I really struggle with. For virtual Rod Day this year, talked about the one and only time I went out and shot a deer by myself, and of course, in that moment was so incredibly proud, but also all knowledge I had of like, okay, now what do I do with this thing left my body. But, you know, again, that's a nice thing about hunting is really as long as you're hunting fair chase and hunting legally, you are the person who sets your own benchmarks for success. So although I typically hunt with a partner, usually my better half by default, you know, hunting solo is not really my thing, but I know so many women who value probably above all other things in hunting the solitude that they get and the physical challenge. So I think it's pretty interesting. There's a diversity of reasons for hunting solo or not. That's just me personally.
I also don't normally hunt solo. I've taken a variety of people with me hunting. I've taken people who aren't hunters. I've taken people who aren't interested in hunting, or maybe they are interested in hunting. It's just nice to have someone there. I just have always liked sharing that experience with someone. It just feels too solitary to me, being alone out in the woods. So I take friends out with me all the time, school friends, people from the club. I'm always taking people out with me.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Next question here also comes from Casey. What do you think your strongest trait is as a hunter? Is it endurance, strength, mental fortitude, marksmanship? What would you most like to improve?
I can start off on that one. I guess I feel like, so back to my tree stand days, I feel like I developed a lot of patience with that. I feel like I'm a really patient hunter in the way that I can sit somewhere and watch for 4 hours. And that's just kind of what I learned from my tree stand days back in Wisconsin. But that also has transferred into learning how to hunt out here. I feel like I had the patience to just take it really slow, honestly. I wasn't in a rush to go out there and hike up mountains to find elk. I wanted to take the time to learn and feel like I was doing it right before I committed to these big hunting experiences. And as far as areas of improvement, I do want to build my confidence. I do want to eventually feel comfortable going out alone and on solo hunts. I'm just not there yet in my personal hunting experience where I feel like I want to do that. So I do want to just keep building that confidence, keep learning, always learning.
Yeah, it's funny that you mention learning as something that you enjoy and you see as a strength in yourself, because I feel much the same way. I think something that, as much as I don't love to talk about things in very gendered ways, I've noticed that overall women have a tendency to leave ego out of the equation when it comes to hunting. And just like I was talking about elk calling with my partner today, and we were observing that some folks have a habit of saying, like, well, the elk are supposed to be here according to my formula, or anything like that, rather than just being a student of the woods and objectively looking at what's in front of you and letting that guide what you do. So that's something that I think just makes hunting more enjoyable for me, and I see it as a personal strength because it makes even days when I get totally skunked, I still am learning something. It's like, okay, well, this was totally wrong. I wasn't wearing the right clothes. Everything is terrible, but I still had a great time. Hunting is such a funny paradox that way. And I guess besides that, just I'm finding more and more that my interest in understanding the biology and the ecology, not only of game species, but also kind of the landscapes that build them, is helping me be better at my job as an archaeologist. It's helping me be a better conservationist, and it's helping me be a better hunter. And so, yeah, I think being a nerd actually can really shake out. And as far as improvements go, everyone could always spend more time at the range, regardless of what your weapon is. So I wish I took more time to make my rifle or my shotgun an extension of myself. And I just wish I were more comfortable being out there solo. You know, growing up the suburbs of New Jersey, where like the most fearsome predator is the mean dog down the street, versus living in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where they're crawling with grizz, crawling with lions, whatever else. Yeah, it's a major roadblock for me, because I could probably do some really cool stuff if I were more comfortable being solo, but maybe it'll come with time, maybe it won't, but oh well.
If I could jump on this one too real quick before Trey goes on to the next question, I think one of the biggest obstacles for me actually pulling the trigger myself is like being comfortable with my marksmanship, because I want to make sure that animal suffers as little as possible. And if I'm not comfortable taking a good, clean, ethical shot, which I know I'm not at this point, then like that's why one major reason why I don't want to pull the trigger. The other part is like actually getting comfortable with the fact that you are taking a life. But a lot of it has to do with that I'm not confident in my marksmanship skills enough to take the life of a living being. And then I would say Madeline's strength is my weakness. I am like the least patient person in the woods I know. I was just talking about this with my parents recently, of like, when I'm backpacking, it's like get from point A to point B as fast as possible. Like, you can stop for a view for like a minute, but like book it. And I don't know why. It's not like I'm racing backpacking. It just happens to be maybe like the competitive nature in me, or I'm very product oriented and not process oriented. So I love like get the feeling of getting to a finish line. So hanging out with some hunting buddies has been really difficult for me, where they're like, yeah, and then we just sit here for 4 hours. And I'm like, doing what? And they're like, no, we just sit. And I'm like, really? Did you bring anything to read? And they're like, no, we just sit. I'm like, I got to go for a walk. And he's like, you can't walk because then you mess up the smells and whatever. So the patience part is definitely new in terms of like, it's different between hunting and like every other outdoor recreation that I've been a part of. Is the point is to move, whereas hunting, the point is to sit still and be one with nature. So that is something, even if I don't pull the trigger, I want to get better at soon.
Awesome. Great responses. So this next question here is, I guess, a few different questions. And for the participants here, if I need to reread any of this, just please let me know. So Marilyn Wright asks, how do you suggest breaking down the gender barrier? You mentioned a bit about the awkwardness that can arise from trying to approach similar-aged male for help or mentoring, but I also have experienced hunting and even my local BHA chapter to be a bit of a bros club, where the guys invite each other out hunting and fishing for guy time, but women are excluded from the invitation. Have you experienced this? And how have or would you go on about trying to have more inclusion?
That's a really good question. And I'm not sure if I have a silver bullet answer for you right now, Marilyn. I think part of it is doing exactly what we're doing now, is like amplifying sportswomen's voices and inviting males into this conversation space too. So I really like it when I see men in the chat bar being a part of this conversation, and it's not just three women preaching to other women. So I think people like us using our voices to amplify other sportswomen, or the articles I shared where you can connect with sportswomen who have like millions of followers on Instagram and YouTube, and like they are making their hunting adventures or even just their like outdoor adventures very, very public. That's a great start, because for me, someone who's a non-hunter, I'm way more likely to see Liz and Madeline on the BHA like listserv somewhere, and just because I recognize that they're women, I will reach out to them and ask for help, maybe before I would some of the men in my own club. And again, that's personal preference. If I feel more comfortable with a female mentor, I'm going to do extra work to seek that out, and then make it extra available for the next people that are coming up behind me. So I think we are making strides. It's just happening maybe slower than we want it to. And one other thing that Andrew Howell is the president at NC State, and I've been his vice president for 2 years. We really try to hold our men accountable too. When we hear comments that are gendered stereotypes or maybe a little ignorant, we try to nip it in the bud really fast and like explain why those comments aren't helpful or aren't particularly inclusive, etc. So it does feel like a lot of work on the females' part to break down those gender barriers, but also that's why I'm here. I'm happy to keep doing it, and I'm hoping it's working for the next people that come through NC State's BHA. So I don't know if you have anything to add, Madeline.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit on that. You mentioned like the bro club atmosphere, and so I wanted to talk about that a little bit, just because I totally feel you on that for sure. It was always growing up in my family, it was so inclusive and everyone was taking me seriously, you know, knew my experiences. Whereas I feel like when I came to Montana, I felt like I had to start all over again in a way. I felt like I had to reestablish myself and find a way to establish my experiences, because I felt like walking into like the meeting room where there's just a bunch of men sitting down, I feel like I automatically counted my experiences out in a way. I automatically assumed that these people know more than me. These people, you know, are better hunters than I am. They've been in Montana longer than me. And a part of changing that feeling for me was just talking to all these people. Because I realized I was not the only one. There are a lot of men in the room who also were trying to get into hunting. It was something that they were really passionate about, and they were also just looking for a place to connect with other hunters. So I guess knowing that you're definitely not the only one who feels intimidated walking into that atmosphere. And I want people to know that you can find people who will support you. And I feel like using your resources like BHA or maybe a local club would be really helpful, because I feel like, you know, I touched on, I had discomfort approaching men that were of my age. And I feel like by talking to BHA, they were able to connect me with mentors who were different. They could talk to me about mentors that they thought fit my needs. And so I feel like just talking to people about the mentorship experience that you're looking for and just being really open about your insecurities maybe and just your concerns about going out with certain people. And I feel like organizations like BHA and organizations that are local, like Artemis is another great organization. They're looking to get you out in the field, and they're looking to make sure that you have a great experience hunting and you continue hunting. And so I feel like people care a lot about it, and that if you just approach people, then they're willing to help you get through those barriers. Yeah.
Now that my Wi-Fi seems to be cooperating again, totally want to echo what Madeline just said. Really, I've had the most success both in terms of breaking down the barrier in the sense of connecting with other women and breaking down the barrier in terms of like, hey, that was really sexist. Don't say that, and here's why. Is usually just one-on-one conversations with individual people. Like, I was really surprised, when after 4 years of dating, the guy who taught me how to hunt and I broke up, I doubled down on all things BHA and Artemis, realizing that those are groups of people that I was going to feel comfortable with. And even though I went into it knowing that folks would be really friendly and very accepting and helpful, I had no idea that you could basically like do the Instagram equivalent of cold calling total strangers, and they will jump through all of the hoops to make sure that you're connected with people both locally and on a national scale who can help support you and help kind of supply you with whatever it is that you need. And then again, just those conversations of personal, not super aggro, with a little bit of patience of just kind of helping folks who are maybe not thinking about why posting a meme that they think is funny actually makes a lot of people feel really not included or not welcome. It's surprisingly fruitful. So yeah, just build your network like one person at a time here and there. And if someone's not your people, that's okay. There are thousands upon thousands of other people who are, I guarantee, way more operating on your level.
Awesome. Thanks for all that feedback there. Being cognizant of everyone's time, we'll take a question or two before we move on. But the next question here is posed by Emily, and she asks, what is your biggest whoops in the field? Have you been able to learn from and overcome it, or is it still something that you're working on?
That's a tough one that I can bite. The biggest whoops for me, besides everyone I'm sure has at least one story of a missed shot. I've lobbed a bullet clear over the back of a beautiful bull elk at like 25 yards a few years ago, and I just cried and screamed and kicked a log. I was so mad at myself. Besides that, though, I think my biggest whoops was, like I was saying, the one time that I went out hunting solo, and once all the adrenaline of having killed a deer by myself left my body, I totally bungled gutting this deer, and it was horrible. And even when I was butchering, I messed up a bunch of things, which for someone whose world revolves around wild game cooking is like, oh my God, what a nightmare. But per usual with hunting, it's mistakes happen, and there's no amount of preparation in the world that could make you perfectly 100% dialed for every single situation that you're gonna run into. So I guess in that case, I'm sure someday I will bungle gutting or quartering something again, and that's okay. Perpetual state of studenthood helps me keep a zen attitude about the inevitable slip-ups like that.
One of my more oops moments was also just a huge learning experience and probably one of my favorite hunts I've ever been on. But my sophomore year, back when I got that scholarship a while ago, I was out looking for elk in the Rattlesnake Wilderness here in Missoula. And it was my first ever like big hunting trip, big elk hunting trip. And I was going with 2 other people who also had never been elk hunting before. And we were just like, we know the elk are here. We've seen them before. Let's just go and try and find them. And I was the only one actually hunting. The other 2 were just kind of along to hang out and support wherever they could. And I had my bow again because I, actually just hunted with a rifle for the first time last year. Super new to rifles, but I had my bow with me and we got super excited. We were hearing bugles, and then one of the people hunting with me, he attempted to bugle and the elk were actually bugling back. So we were feeling pretty accomplished by then. And so I tried crawling down this pretty steep, rocky hillside. And the goal was to attempt to end up in the same field as the elk that were bugling. And we were trying to communicate with the people on the ridge who were watching where the elk were, and they were trying to communicate with me on where to go. And I ended up like sitting in this field for like an hour, hearing this elk bugle, and I literally just had to move 50 feet the other direction, and I would have been only about 30 yards away from this massive bull elk. I was just going back to my Wisconsin roots and sitting in one place and like, oh, this elk's gonna come to me. This elk's gonna come to me. I just gotta sit here and I gotta wait. And so I was just sitting there waiting for this elk to come, and eventually this opportunity just completely passed by because I just didn't feel comfortable moving. I felt like I had to sit in one spot, just like a tree stand. And that's when I missed, the opportunity of a lifetime with this massive bull. That's kind of my oops moment, trying to hunt in Montana based on my, Wisconsin tree hunting experiences. So now I try and be better. I try to move more than once.
Awesome, thank you. Tori, would you have anything to add of not necessarily for a whoops moment, but just in the field?
I'm sure there are some, but now that I'm put on the spot, I wasn't thinking while they were talking. Yeah, at this point, skip over me. I'd rather answer another question than talk about my mistakes in the field.
Sounds good. Well, actually, with that, since we're running short on time here, we're going to move on to drawing our Filson door prize. And so one lucky winner is going to walk away with a large dry duffel bag and a beanie. And if I call your name, then please shout it out in the chat box. Feel free to say something nice there. So we did the drawing, and the winner is Kara Braxton. Is Kara still with us? We'll give her a moment. We'll draw again if Kara's still not here.
Can I say one
Anything?
more big thanks to BHA and Filson for having us and putting this on. This has been an incredible experience for me, so I'm hoping our audience got something out of it as well. But I just wanted to say thanks again for letting me be here. I'm stoked.
I appreciate that. So it looks like Kara's not with us anymore, so we're going to go ahead and call number 2. Hopefully this winner is in the house. If not, might have to draw a third. And so second person is Kristin Morrell. Kristin Morrell. Oh, looks like she just commented, so she's still here. Hopefully she didn't log off. All right, we're going to call it as Kristin Morrell won the duffel and the beanie. We'll pull your contact info. And if you don't hear from us, just email us at admin@backcountryhunters.org. We'll get in touch with you. With that, I would like to again thank Liz, Madeline, and Tori for taking the time, and thank each of you for joining us tonight. Please join us for the rest of the BHA and Filson Skills Night, especially the final two Women in the Woods events, which we'll be talking about gear for women and becoming an independent outdoors woman. With that, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Filson for sponsoring this series. Everyone have a good night.